So what have we seen this year? We've seen a really massive importance of the health traits, and maybe it's self-fulfilling prophecy or something that we obviously encourage our clients to look hard at those traits. But we've seen, particularly over here in New Zealand, where triple drench resistance is pretty real on lots of farms. So worms are a major focus. Labour's getting more and more difficult to find. So things like dag become important. Obviously, fly strike associated with dag is important over the summer months. So they're the things that people then focus on. Feet is also been a big focus. Lots of sales that have gone pretty well for generally, but the rams that turn up with really good health traits are the ones that sought after. Wool quality is always a focus, and obviously quality wool's always, or white wool particularly, is always a bit of a focus. A lot of the places we work, the carcass traits are kind of locked in, so sort of no real feature of those necessarily. They're demanded, but mostly they're kind of already locked in a lot of places, so you can kind of buy across the catalogue without looking at them too much. Growth has been there or thereabouts in terms of what people have been looking for. People don't really want low growth animals, but I don't think they're paying a premium for super high growth animals. I think it's more around those health traits this year. We've seen at the Ernst Clue ultrafine sales some really strong demand for those rams. That particular ultrafine market has been really strong in recent years, and people are starting to really lock in on that. Those that have got the ewe flocks that can lock in on that are starting to realise the power of genetics, I suppose, to make some incremental gains. And that part of the game where every 0.1 of a micron's worth lots of dollars, when you're down in the 12s, 11s, genetics can obviously offer that, and dropping a few points of micron matters. And so, we saw that ultrafine sale as strongest it's ever been, with a top of 15K, a beautiful pole ram offered by Ernst Clue with negative worm egg count and some nice carcass traits. So a really cool ultrafine ram, and obviously hit some pretty strong demand. And that was great to see. We don't often see merino ram prices in New Zealand hit 15 grand, so that was great to see. But I guess that's quite a unique breeding program. The rest have sort of looked more on the health traits. In catalogues where there has been a sort of micron spread, 23 was probably a bit of a cutoff. Most people try and chase that, what we call quarterbred here in New Zealand, so 3/4 merino type genetics or finer, half-bred, which are the stronger edge of that. A little bit harder to shift in a lot of those sales, with people really focusing on that finer end, which is what the market's told us for the last little while. That may change again. We've seen some strong wool prices around across all micron categories in the last few weeks, and right through to actual strong wool, crossbred wool. So that'll be interesting how that plays out in the market. People have I think the demand for finer wool in some of those more, I guess, composite type breeding programs or half-bred, quarter-bred type breeding programs have moved their sights down to a finer micron quicker than people could breed them down to that final level. So that's been a bit of a challenge for ram breeders, it's always a moving target, and you've got to be ahead of the market, but you're not sure what the market is going to do. But we've seen certainly strong wool. Strong demand for those that sort of sub 23 probably being a bit of a cut-off across where people don't want to buy beyond that. One thing we've probably struggled with, as usual, is that people are happy to accept breeding values across most traits, but when it comes to micron or fibre diameter, they want to actually look at the raw number. Just a reminder that the breeding value is the most accurate thing to look at. The raw number is very much influenced by the environment, when that sample was taken, where it was taken. Particularly nutrition. It's a massive influence. Single, twin, born out of a maiden, born out of an adult, all those things are influencing that actual raw micron. So we certainly keep encouraging people to look at the breeding value for fibre diameter. But it is the one trait that people are used to kind of having a guide on what it is. So they kind of want to see that raw number, even though that doesn't necessarily tell them as much as the breeding value would. And so, we continue to encourage that. But where they've had it, people have certainly shied away from the stronger edge of the market, but certainly across all sales, people are rewarding quality where they can get the number of those traits all lined up. They were certainly happy to pay for it. I guess just reflects people really getting quite choosy with the rams they're buying now. Education is an interesting challenge, I suppose. People, for ram breeders at least, the smarter we get our ram buyer set, the more fussy they get on the genetics they buy, and that's a good thing that we have that that tension. We do have to make sure we maintain our expectations okay. We're all looking for the holy grail or a perfect set of data matched with a beautiful phenotype, and that's not particularly easy to find, and particularly in the sale where where that is possible, the stud breeder will retain those genetics to pass on to the next generation. It's always a bit of a challenge to once we know what good is, to sort of accept something that's a bit less than perfect. I think one thing I've sort of been rattling on about to clients over the ram sale season is that concept of the team you take home. Every individual ram doesn't have to have every trait in the right box to make your average team look good. And I guess when we think about the genes passing into that next generation, what gets passed on is the average of your ram team. So one ram might be a little bit back in growth or back in fleece weight or for one of the traits that's important to you, but it'd be made up by another one that's might be higher in that trait, but a bit lower in something else. And so the average is actually what you're buying. When you're buying one bull, it's kind of different because you've got a smaller, if you've got a small cow herd, and then one bull can matter. But when it comes to rams, if you've got a few sheep around you, that individual ram is nowhere near as important as the average of the team. So you can accept a few traits. And that's where our indexing for our commercial clients has really come to its own, where we index them up and rate them based on that. And even though an animal might, in a previous world where we were using cutoffs and stuff, we would have said, oh, well, we don't buy that animal because he's outside our range. But because he's got strength across the other aspects, on average, he's actually bringing something to the table. So that's been certainly something we've focused on this year, is to think about the average team rather than any individual in it. Obviously, we all want those perfect individuals, but they're not easy to find. One other thing that I guess has always fascinated me and continues to keep me a little bit intrigued, and I've been guilty of it in the past, is that I guess the challenge of transparency. It's one of the things we very heavily encourage our stud breeders to do, our clients, is to measure as much as they can in terms of the traits that are important to them and their clients. So try and get really good data on the things that matter to them and their clients. And then the other thing we like to strongly encourage is to actually be transparent with that and let people know what that data is. So put that data in the catalogue, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. It is what it is, and make sure people have the information available to them to make their choices. And I guess we've seen maybe that bite a few people this year, where animals that weren't perfect for a particular trait, maybe that was foot rot or worms or whatever, got pretty harshly dealt to in the market. I guess the challenge for me is, and I'll tell you a story in a second about back in the days when I was buying Port Dorset rams, but the challenge of being compared with animals with no data. So you go to a sale, they've got all the data, and you say, well, that one's no good because it's got positive worm egg count. Then you go to the sale the next day that's got no information, maybe a micron, maybe a fleece weight and a body weight or something, no actual genetic information, and you buy a ram because he looks good, yet he could be 2, 3 times, 4 times worse for the worm egg count breeding value or for all the traits that matter to you. Yet there's no information, so you just make the call that he must be okay. And I remember very vividly at the Melbourne show where they used to sell Port Dorset rams, or it was a sort of a terminal breed type sale. Me and my brother Tim and Brian Hurley, Boots, were down there to try and buy our next super sire. I would have been, this was in 2002 or 3 maybe, after I'd moved to Hamilton. It would have been my mid-20s, and probably before really being full bottle on breeding values, and probably in the time where I was skeptical of data and skeptical of breeding values. And I remember we were looking around the rams, and you'd see a ram with lamb plan information on it, and it might be low growth or low muscle or something, and you're going, oh, that's a bit rough, and we wouldn't buy that one. And then you go to the next pen that didn't have any data available, and it looked amazing, and you're sort of going, oh, we should buy that one. But you're always, I don't think we actually bought any that day, but I do reflect back thinking that it's so easy when you don't have the data to make a decision, because you're just looking at the structure and the type, and that becomes really, really easy. But trying to match that with data is a big challenge in breeding. And we see that every now and again, where you get sort of let off the leash a little bit, where you've been going through animals with data all day, and then you get a few come through that haven't got data, and then you can just go with your gut feel and what you think, and you're making that call, and it's a massive relief in your brain, because you're not having to compute heaps of information all of a sudden. Yet you're not actually doing much of a job, because you are completely dictated to by all the environmental factors that have driven that animal to be what it is. But it's easy, and it makes you feel pretty comfortable. But knowing what we know now, obviously we don't do it that way, other than when we have to, because we don't have any information. But I think in ram sales, it's been, I guess, it's always frustrating, I guess, to be honest. when we see animals that have no data getting good demand or stronger demand than animals that have data that mightn't be perfect, because it just makes no sense that the risk taken of an animal with no information is way, way higher than one taken where you know what its problems are, and therefore, maybe you kind of know what you're dealing with. Whereas if you don't, you're just absolutely guessing. So I think all of you out there who's lining up to buy rams in the winter or spring in Australia, seriously, people that are doing really well in this game, the people that are making genetic gain commercially, the people that we deal with, that we see going from strength to strength in their sheep and not just reproducing the stuff they've had for 15 years, are those that are using the data to its full advantage, and those that have worked out which traits that they want to maximize, and they're going out there and they're doing it, and they're seeing the rewards from it commercially in terms of some of the health traits, some of the savings, as well as some of the productivity gains. I know it's pretty obvious for me to say breeding values work, but they do. And they're powerful. And if you can get them, get them. If never, get yourself convinced that those sheep are great because they look great, because often that's just an amazing environmental manipulation that the industry is pretty good at in some parts, where they can feed them, house them, look after them, or just run them on good paddocks and make them look amazing, trim feet. There's a lot of that going on out there. None of our clients, but there's plenty of people out there, well, none that I know of anyway, but there's people out there who definitely are trimming feet, and some people thinking they're getting a great foot shape when it's just been manicured to be that way. Lots of challenges, I guess, out there. But I guess the other thing worse than having no information is what we're seeing a bit this year, with people picking and choosing what they put in the catalogue. And you can say it's an error, or you can say it's deceptive. Some of the traits they're really not good at, they just don't put in the catalogue. And I think that's a pretty risky thing to do as a business. I've seen some people do that, and I think that's it's probably the worst sin, when if you've got people who have triple drench resistance and are fighting for worms, and you've got that information on your animals and you're not putting it in the sale catalogue. Yes, you can find it on sheep genetics, so it's not completely non-transparent, but it's not in the catalogue, and so it's not being highlighted for people to see, for those that aren't as well educated and or came out poorly, not uneducated, but uneducated in the breeding values and how you would find that on sheep genetics, just haven't had that opportunity. Is that's a bit of a concern, where we've seen animals with really, really quite bad data that you can find in the database, but in the catalogue it looks like they're great because you only put the traits in there that look good. So I guess buyer beware. If there's information that you think you need and you can't find it, get in touch. We can help you find it. I guess if you're out there and you're thinking, I'm just making all this crap up, and that you've got great sheep and you don't need data to do that, then what I would say to you is prove it. Do a flock profile. Give us a call. We'll send out the TSUs and get that profile done, and we can do that through our partnership with Weatherby's, and get that information back to you on the average genetic merit of those animals. And inevitably, you will be surprised that they will be good for something, and they will not be good for some other things. And so if you've been buying rams and you haven't had the information available to you to do that, to use those breeding values, then big opportunity to use genomics to actually look at what your flock's up to and tell you your strengths and weaknesses. We've been doing a bit of that in New Zealand. There's obviously heaps that done in Australia, and it's always great to see what that average is, and it's a great benchmark. You can do it again in 3 to 5 years. Have a look, is your selection process making gains? And that's a really true way of what's going on. Just to clarify how that works, so the DNA is matched to, so DNA from the individual animals is taken, so a TSU is taken, sent away, get the DNA, get that turned into a genotype through genomics processes. That then goes off to sheep genetics and gets matched in with a database. And because there's lots of animals that have known phenotypes, that have been measured for the stuff, and they've also had their DNA, and there's a big database of that, essentially it goes and says, well, we know that this little portion of DNA does this for this particular trait, and those weightings get applied, and you end up with a genomic breeding value for those animals, or as a flock. And you can actually get that on individuals as well now through our neXtPredict service if you wanted to do that as well. So you could actually do your individual ram team as well to give you a guide of what's going on within them and rank them within themselves as well. But I think if you haven't been able to get information, then you owe it to yourself and your business to have a look. Again, the people that are going ahead in this game are using all these tools to their best advantage, and we're seeing more and more of that. We're seeing really some big uptake in these sort of tools because we do want to be the place that's doing 4% genetic gain, 3, 4, 5% genetic gain. We don't want to be the place that's doing 0.5% and behind inflation in our genetic gain, because there is a big opportunity cost from that.